Hey, everybody, welcome back to Get in the Game. I'm your host, Scott Linebrink, and I'm grateful that you tuned in for this episode. This podcast is all about faith and service and what it means to live out our calling as believers and use the gift that God has given us to serve others. And I'm pleased to welcome on today's episode Matt Hasselbeck. He enjoyed a distinguished 18-year career as an NFL quarterback, mostly with the Seattle Seahawks, where he became a three-time Pro Bowl selection. He led the franchise to its first Super Bowl appearance, and he's also learned a host of other titles, was recognized for his toughness, his preparation. He later received the Bart Starr Award, honoring his outstanding character and leadership on and off the field. And that's really where I'm excited to talk to Matt about is his takes on leadership and what the game of football taught him in the way of that. So, Matt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited. You can add to my accolades a really good snow shoveler, because that's what I've been doing all morning here in Boston, Massachusetts. It's hard work, grit, and determination. Those are things they say about like professional athletes, quarterbacks. It was tested today in the snow. It wasn't that cold, but it was like that wet, heavy snow. And I own a snow blower, but it wasn't working right. And it was a true test of will today with that shovel, man. And I'll probably have the stiff low back tomorrow to remember it by.
Well, I can appreciate the old man aches and pains. I cannot appreciate the snow because I'm down here in Texas where it's going to be 66 degrees today. But I did watch that
Rub
game.
Rub it in, man. Rub it in.
But, man, I was watching that game yesterday, and you could hardly see the field, that snow coming down, which is where actually I wanted to start because we just watched C.J. Stroud and the Texans lose a heartbreaking game to the New England Patriots, and CJ, of course, had a rough game, threw 4 first-half interceptions. And I wanted to ask you about that because I'm sure at some point you were in a similar situation. You know, after the game, CJ publicly apologized to the fan base. He took full responsibility, but man, how tough is that to take responsibility for a game like that?
Well, it's tough to play in those elements. You mentioned it. You know, I think Drake May fumbled 4 times as well. He just didn't lose them all. But it's so funny. You hear the announcers. I think it was Troy Aikman. They're up in the booth. They're like, the weather's really not that bad. It's like, you're in the booth, man. Like, don't forget what it was like when you're out on the field. I mean, I remember playing in an AFC championship game in New England. Actually, Andrew Luck was the starting quarterback and I was the backup quarterback late in my career. I'm 40 years old. I'm sitting there and it wasn't going well. And, as a backup, you got to be like sort of ready to go at any moment. And, I remember being there, like sitting there and like sort of like grabbing a football, being like, man, I always want to play, but like it would be tough to throw the ball and throw it accurately today. So I was feeling for Drake May and CJ Stroud that, those were tough conditions and no one cares. No one wants to hear excuses. They want excellence and they want the ball to be delivered where it's supposed to go on time and catchable passes and, all the rest. And then if it doesn't happen, that's really what you need to do. You need to look in the mirror and you need to take the blame and accept responsibility and then improve. And so, I think a lot of those 2 young quarterbacks, I think they're super talented. I think they're great leaders, but it was a tough game. It was a tough game to be a part of. And, like the elements are a thing and you're never going to hear a great quarterback or a great leader ever make an excuse like that. It's not going to happen, but it's real. And you do need to figure out. First 3 years of my career, I played in Green Bay, Wisconsin, backed up Brett Favre. And we talked about, how we're going to play in these elements. And then we would even practice it. In August, there's something called a wet ball drill. On a beautiful day, you dunk all the footballs in buckets of water and you practice. For the day where it's not like that, or maybe it's just half the practice. And so it's, there's a lot that goes into it. And, if you want to be great in January, February, December, you gotta play in elements.
Man, I love that, practicing with the wet ball because, so much like when we go, I'm just going to use golf as an example. We go to the driving range and we sit on a level playing surface and, we're hitting balls that are teed up, but like what happens when you get down in the bunker and you got to hit one on an angle, it's buried deep down in the sand. Like you got to practice for what you play, right?
Yeah, or if you're me, you're 20 yards in the woods, like with like a 5% chance of even getting out, and your real issue is like you're looking for snakes, and then like, hey, if you find your ball, you find your ball. If you find a ball, it's like, yeah, it's a ball. It's a 1-for-1 trade here. It's around this vicinity. I'm certainly not practicing that shot on the driving range, but I can resonate with the premise of what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, back to this role of quarterback and the leadership role that you have to play. Let's bring faith into it, because I know you're a deep man of faith. We know C.J. Stroud, who we just referred to, is a deep man of faith as well. So what lessons does your faith bring in times like that, when you're at the bottom or you're looking for a way to accept responsibility to lead your team? How does your faith incorporate into that?
Well, for me, I think the lens that I see everything through is through the lens of my faith, and how the lessons, all of it, like every single thing. I thought one of the cooler things last night after the Houston Texans New England Patriots game, and ESPN, credit to them for sticking with it, they showed Drake May and CJ Stroud and their teammates all praying together at the 50-yard line after the game. Something that happened at every single game that I ever played in the NFL in 18 years. I can't think of one time that didn't happen, where guys from both sets of teams would get together and say a prayer after the game. And I think it's a sign of unity that, like, in a way, like, football is like our everything, like 7 days a week during the season. And yet there's something even bigger than football, and a camaraderie, a togetherness, a brotherhood that goes way beyond the emblem on the side of your helmet. And, I thought that was a really cool thing. And here you have one guy, Drake May, who looks like he's on his way to the Super Bowl, and he's like on the top of the mountain. Right. And then you got another guy, CJ Stroud, who probably had the worst game of his life, 4 interceptions in the first half. And, who knows what the results of this are going to be. And so like, he's at the bottom, and it doesn't really matter. Like, both guy, they're both on a knee, with their eyes closed, holding hands with each other, saying the exact same prayer. And I'm not sure which teammate or who was led that prayer, but it's the same prayer, and like, doesn't matter, so I think that's like a lesson in how you handle the highs of the high and the lows of the low. And, and I've had that, like, I've been there. I've been the CJ Stroud guy. I've been there, lost a Super Bowl, and I'm sitting there waiting to pray with the Steelers, and they're, obviously celebrating with their black and yellow confetti and looking for their kids in the stands to put them on their shoulders. And we had to like wait patiently while they celebrated what was in our minds supposed to be ours, and pray. And so I thought it was a cool thing. It resonated with me, and it's one of many, many lessons that you learn, or you even like exercise what when you live it out as a Christian, and also just as a player, as a quarterback, or as whatever, as the person holding the sticks on the chains on the sideline. We're all living it out in our own ways.
Yeah, that's great. Matt, can you think of that's a great story about the Super Bowl, but other moments in your career where you really started to see your NFL career as more than just football, but an opportunity to glorify God? And what did that shift look like in practically in how you lived and led?
Well, yeah, I think, even going back to draft day, I mean, I remember being in the basement of my house, a bunch of people were upstairs. My mom and dad and we went downstairs, and, I think, my girlfriend was with me, who's now my wife. And I remember we said a prayer, like we were praying for God to open the door and make an opportunity for something that I had been working so hard for. It was a lot of like asking for stuff. I think it was like draft day, and then, cut day, and then, hopefully I get an opportunity, like those kinds of, I think that was kind of how I saw it a little bit. And then there was a shift where it wasn't that, where the shift was, maybe it was like, okay, as you're following your dream and working as hard as you can towards this goal, make disciples. And it was like a total shift. And I'm not exactly sure. I could point to some things that I think, it's probably right here. But it reminds me a little bit of when Mike McCarthy became my quarterback coach in Green Bay. he wanted us on a 5-step drop. So as a quarterback, you have a 1-step, a 3-step, a 5-step, and a 7-step drop under center. And if you're in shotgun, you just subtract 2. So a 7-step drop from shotgun is just 5. Well, the bread and butter drop is a 5-step drop under center. And we were running the Brett Favre offense that which was, he learned from Mike Holmgren, but that once upon a time was the Bill Walsh offense that Joe Montana ran. And Mike McCarthy wanted us to do the Joe Montana drop, which was on the 3rd step, was a real strong heel to toe strike. And we in the room, we were like, what? That's crazy. Who does that? No one does a 3rd step heel toe strike. No one does that. I'm not going to do that. And Mike McCarthy, to his credit, he was like, listen, okay, I understand it's hard, but here's what I want you to do. Every single day for the first 15 minutes of like practice, basically our drill work and everything that we do, I want you to do this Joe Montana drop. I just want you to do it every single day. Muscle memory. I want you to do it. And then once we get to past that part of practice and now we're competitive and we're, competing or whatever, I don't even want you to think about it. I just want you to do what comes natural and do it your way, whatever. And we were like, okay, fine. That's deal. We'll do that. And I remember like halfway through that season, I'm sitting there and I'm watching me in a real 11-on-11 situation against the defense, against the starting defense. And I'm sitting there and I'm in slow motion. I'm doing this 3rd step heel toe strike. And it was like this. It was kind of like whatever discipline you commit to, it's going to show up. It's going to show up on film. It's going to show up on tape. And so, I could definitely point to an instance when I was the starting quarterback in Seattle where I had a conversation with a teammate that was very convicting and where I was feeling like at that point in my faith journey, I was really good at sort of being a connector to new teammates, to our chaplain. And yet I didn't see myself, or I wasn't doing the daily disciplines to be prepared to be someone that was actively discipling people. Mm-hmm. And I think that was probably just like an example of, Then I like locked in, matured, grew up, got prepared. And then I just think like somewhere along the way, I'm looking back and I'm like seeing the fruit that was born out of this discipline and commitment, much like the 5-step drop. And, it doesn't mean you're going to be a great quarterback if you get your 5-step drop right, but it's a foundational piece. Mm-hmm. And it's really, really hard to be successful if you don't have that foundational piece right. And so I think the correlation is kind of similar. And ironically for me, they kind of happened at about the same time. Like the two things were happening like simultaneously. And in a weird way, I think they were connected as well in terms of my maturity.
Yeah. I love how you said that. Whatever you practice is what's going to show up on film. And I believe that to be true. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing you would agree that if you practice spiritual disciplines, you're going to make that a part of your habit, your routine. It's going to show up each day.
No doubt. And it's on the tip of your tongue. And for me, like some of the other things that were really big at that point was the music I was listening to, the things I was reading consistently, and was just like on the tip of my tongue. And I think it was the same thing on the playbook. Like a coach, you sit in these quarterback meetings and the coach will usually just ask a question. He's not really asking a question to a certain person. He's sort of just asking a question. Hey, who knows the answer to this? And if you're locked and loaded and you're in that playbook, like you got the answer, what do they like to do out of a 25 front? Oh, they like to bring 3 fire zone, Sam Mike, strong dog. Like, oh, okay, good. What about out of a 57 front? Oh, probably a weak dog, free safety down, like bam, like you're just on it. Because you're in the book, you're in the playbook and you don't actually even have to even try so hard because it's like already you've done the work in a sense. It just becomes like who you are and how you talk and how your brain works. And so like, I don't think it's any different, in our faith journey as well. Like if you have a confidence about you when you've kind of committed to it.
Yeah, I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but you reminded me of it here. I'm thinking back to the first time I ever ran out onto a major league field, and in the middle of the game, come in like the 6th, 7th inning, and I'm running out there, and I'm just thinking while I'm running out there, I can't even. I'm having an out of body experience. I don't even know what I'm doing. And as I'm going through my warm up routine, it's like my mind is so many other places right now than what I'm doing, and it's almost like my body has taken over and it's doing the same thing that I practiced thousands of times. And thank goodness I did practice it, because otherwise, I mean, I would have been, my head's in the stands, my head's, and the guy in the on deck circle, the guy that I've grown up watching on TV that I'm about to face. And so, that just muscle memory took over in that moment, and I really gained an appreciation for how much we practice and why we practice.
That's a great. I mean, I'm feeling it. Like with you, I didn't play professional baseball, but I can I can feel the moment. And I got even going back to Green Bay, one of the biggest games I ever played in. It was a Monday Night Football game, it was a preseason game, ironically, but it was it was kind of cut down time, and Brett Favre gets hurt on the 7th play of the game, and it's like, go, you're in. And I had like no time to kind of react. It didn't even have my mouthpiece with me. It was just like, I just get out there, and I just kind of did it was like I was flying a 747. I'm a pilot. And I'm just like, I just know the checklist. It's like, don't, and here we go. And it's just that same kind of thing. But I also think there's this one voice for me anyway, as a quarterback, it's always this like one voice that it's not like you're not thinking about everything, but you're thinking about something. And my first year was Andy Reid. My second year was Mike McCarthy. And I had great coaches throughout the years, but every year it was kind of that coach's voice of, Andy Reid would have one main thing that he would always say: stay low, stay low. He'd say like, TV commentators are going to talk about stand tall in the pocket. That's not true. You want to bend your knees, stay low, stay low. And so it was like this one thing, like you get in there with him, and, he's kind of this like voice, his voice in your head. Stay low. Like in everything that I'm doing, stay low. And so like, I think in the same way, like in seasons where, I like to read the Bible in a year in different formats, this year I'm doing it chronologically. And there's like in seasons as you go, there's like maybe a theme, like whatever it is, trust me, don't be afraid, like whatever that one voice is, that one thing. I don't know. As a player, it really helped me. I think as a dad, it helps me. As a father, it helps me. As a husband, it helps me. I just think that it's really powerful when you can have good coaching as a quarterback. And I think like good coaching is important in just about everything. And life is hard to do without a guide. Amen. And for me, the scriptures have been that 100%.
Yeah. Well, Matt, let's shift gears a little bit, because I know you've been involved in serving the poor and engaging with real needs around the world. You've worked with some organizations like Compassion. You've done trips into the field. Maybe you could talk about some of those experiences or encounters that opened your eyes to the depth of some of these challenges, and how did it change you?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were to look at our giving or what we've been involved in, it's been like heavy on the international global mission side, which is sort of ironic because it's not really ever anything that I ever thought I would be about. I think I was just like most kids who grow up in America playing sports, and I'd never really been outside the country. Never, my idea of like traveling overseas was like, maybe going to Epcot, and like walking around a couple times. Like I knew nothing. And when I was in college, I got invited to go on like a service trip in the slums of Kingston, Jamaica, working with victims of leprosy and at an orphanage and all this stuff. And basically, if I'm being honest, the only reason that I ended up going on the trip is that I couldn't come up with a good enough excuse not to go, and so I ended up going on the trip, and it was life-changing. I saw the world a whole different way. And I thought like going into it, I'm going down there to help them. And one of the many things I learned is that they helped me far more than I could have ever helped them. I was a college quarterback trying to become the starter, really struggling at that, was a backup to the backup. And, if you would ask me who my heroes were, who the people I wanted to be like were, I would have told you John Elway, Steve Young, Joe Montana, Brett Favre, like some of those type guys. And when I was down there in Jamaica, I met a guy who had leprosy, an elderly man in like a nursing home, a leper home, who had no eyes, no nose, no hands. And he was playing this harmonica in between. Uh, he was playing this harmonica, and we were all singing hymns. And in between songs, he would take his, like what he had for hands, kind of like he would take the harmonica down, and he would say, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for blessing my life." And in that moment, I no longer aspired to be like these great NFL quarterbacks. In that moment, I was like, man, I hope that I could someday have what this guy George has. And it was a life-changing experience for me. And I just think I saw everything different after that. And, there's more to the story. I got really, really sick after that. I got hepatitis A, and it was like not a smooth road by any stretch, but that was, I think, a line in the sand of when my eyes were opened and I saw everything differently, and I don't think I could ever be the same again. And so when I look back at kind of what we've done through this NFL career and the opportunity to be generous and go places and do things as a family, I can't help but think that God's hand was in this, like, this punk, arrogant kid from Boston who had an encounter with the Holy Spirit through a leper in Jamaica. It was life-changing.
Yeah, you mentioned that it had an impact on your kids too. What did that look like? What are some maybe stories that you remember from taking your kids into the field?
Well, I think, as a Christian, I really feel like, God, I trust you with everything. I trust you with everything. And then you have kids, and then, like, do I trust you fully with my kids? And I think that was a struggle for us, or a struggle for me in particular, where, I trust you with my life, but do I trust you with their lives? And so some of these things you feel like they can be kind of dangerous, but I know we got to the point where it was like, okay, I feel like the right thing to do is to be obedient and to take your kids out into the field and expose them to things that you weren't exposed to as a kid. And, we took our kids a bunch of places, Haiti, Africa, all different places. And, I think one of the things I learned is that the kids were way more resilient than I gave them credit for. But it was a great reminder of what it's like to really fully sort of let go and trust God in everything. And, the ripple effect of, those trips on our family and others connected to us or our kids has just been incredible. And to see the impact that it's had not only on them and, like, that moment, but also just like when you look back 20 years later, you're like, wow, like I didn't see it then, but I see it now. And so, no, it's a special thing. And again, it takes me back to that first thing. Like, you think that you're going there to help someone else, and you are blessed so much more than you could ever imagine, being blessed. And it just doesn't stop in that moment. Like it's a forever type of thing.
So, Matt, many athletes talk, and how long have you been retired now?
Think I'm 2015, so I think I'm 10 years out now.
Okay, all right.
Feels like 20 years though, if I but no, I think I'm 10 years out.
Okay. So you haven't quite, or you have passed the threshold of Phillip Rivers. You're not contemplating a return.
Well, I was one of the people really nervous for him when Phillip Rivers at 44 years old, when he said he was going to come back. I was like, in fact, if I'm being really honest, what I did was, because I used to play for the Colts, what I did was I said, okay, if he's going to play, I know he's going to like pop a calf or an Achilles or something like that. Who are they going to call after that? I better at least be ready so that if anyone ever did call me, I would have the option to say no, because anyway, I don't think I ever got there, but I was happy for him. Count me in all, like, the list of the group of middle-aged men that were sort of cheering for him. It was pretty cool what he did. And I think it just goes to show too that a lot of quarterbacking isn't about the stuff they measure for at the combine. Mm-hmm. It's leadership, it's intangibles, it's knowledge of the game, it's vision, it's decision-making. It's about making the people around you better. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a great lesson. And my hope is that the quarterbacks on that team, Daniel Jones, Riley Leonard, that he made a great impact on their careers, basically learning from a guy like that, doing what he did. It was pretty cool to see, I thought.
Well, I agree with you completely, and I was rooting for him as a fellow old guy. I can't imagine what that's like to go back and play in the NFL at 44. Um, but athletes, you and I both know, and we've seen other athletes. We've talked to guys that talk about the emptiness and the loss that can come whenever we give up a career that we've done so long and competed at the highest level. How has engaging in some of this mission work and acts of mercy and service given you a deeper sense of purpose beyond your playing days?
Yeah, well, again, I think I don't think it's I think it's the lens that I see everything through, like everything. So it's not like that part necessarily changed. I think what changes is that you're out on your own. When you're in a locker room, everything's kind of there for you. There's there's a Bible study that's right there. Like it's like a short walk from your locker to the meeting room. There's a chapel service at the hotel the night before every game. It's not like there's like no effort that goes into it. There's a couple study that typically, like you come home from work and your wife has already kind of like planned it and you just kind of put clean clothes on and show up. I mean, it's kind of like that's all there for you. And then you take the football side, you show up to the weight room to work out. There's a strength and conditioning staff that stayed up all night thinking about, okay, what would be the best workout for him tomorrow? My job, I just walk in, let's see what's on the whiteboard and do it. I got the easy job. I'm available and show up. And then once I'm there, I work hard. But when you leave the game and you leave that kind of camaraderie and really the coaching, like there is no chapel service, there is no team chaplain, there is no quarterback coach, there is no strength coach, there is no head athletic trainer, there is no equipment manager, there is no PR person. It's just you. And so the camaraderie in the locker room and friends, like that's real. But I think even greater than that, you miss the coaching. Mm-hmm. Like when I go to work on a Wednesday, so I'll use Thursday. When I go to work on a Thursday in the NFL, what do I do for half the day? We watch in slow motion on video everything I did on Wednesday. And I get corrected and coached and tightened up. When you're done playing, like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, like what, there's no market correction, So it's, I think that's like the danger. You better have a great command. Like, they talk about quarterbacks having command of the huddle. When you step in the huddle, hey, I have command of the huddle. I think it's important to have command of yourself and your self-discipline, to command a huddle. But even more so when you're done, when you transition out of a career, you better be locked in terms of like, here are the disciplines that are non-negotiables. Here's the foundation that I'm building everything on. And that can be tough when you move, when you transition out of a job. And it's, I think, one of the reasons that a lot of guys struggle. And I would say it's real. From my experience, I felt like it was extremely real.
So you talk about that appreciation for coaching. Do you find yourself now gravitating toward that role of coach, whether it's with your kids or with players in the game now?
I do. And, for the last 4 years, I've actually helped as a high school coach, and it's been great. It's been great. But I also have a newfound appreciation for how hard coaching is. And sometimes when you're coaching somebody hard, sometimes the player thinks, oh, you're just being hard on me. Like, no, I just really want you to maximize your potential. I just want you to be more efficient. I want you to be more successful, really. And so, yeah, I do. I probably have a newfound respect for how hard the job was to coach me at times. Like sometimes you can be like maybe someone who has all the answers, and I don't want to say like a know-it-all, but in a sense where, you get coached on something, well, I should be fine. I don't know if that's really that important, but there's something about people that have been there and done it, or that can see from maybe like a 35,000 foot view, hey, here's something I think would really help. Mm-hmm. Here's a guardrail that I think would really help you. Here's a discipline that I think could unlock a potential that you have inside of you that maybe isn't fully refined. But I see the potential, and I think you could really be something special if you would kind of lean into this area of your life. So I do think that it's important to have those people in your life, whether, if you're a quarterback, those people they're there. They're paid to be there. But if you're not, it's important to have those people in your life regardless. You need to find them.
So we've probably got a lot of coaches, a lot of dads listening to this podcast. You're the dad of two girls and a boy. So you know what it's like, the difference between girls and boys. I'm just a girl dad. And my kids tell me all the time, like, we got volleyball players over here. My wife played volleyball in college. My kids are playing volleyball. And they always, I try to interject a little bit, give them some coaching. They're like, Dad, what do you know? You played baseball. I'm like, well, there are some things that correlate here. But what could you tell the coaches and the dads out there, and what's the most important thing that you can do as a coach of your kids?
It's a great question. And, I've got, I have two girls, but I'll just say every kid's different. My girls could not be more different, and so like really knowing your kid, knowing the right thing to say, but also just knowing the wrong thing to say. Also having patience in what you say, like for me, I almost would rather hear my kids answer about this question, but I know like a few things. So like just one thing, when I was coaching my own son, I learned some stuff when Mike Holmgren was coaching me. Mike Holmgren and I would butt heads a lot. Like we would butt heads a lot. And we loved each other, but like he was intense. I was intense on the field. And sometimes you say something that you can't take back. And so, Mike Holmgren, actually, this was a recommendation from Mike Holmgren's wife. She said, Mike, when your quarterback comes off the field after an unsuccessful third down, why don't you just take a little walk and touch the 30-yard line and have him go grab a cup of Gatorade and like a Dixie cup size Gatorade, have him drink it. When you've touched the 30 and then he's drank that little cup, then why don't you guys come together and have a coachable moment? But just take a deep breath and just create some space. And that was something, like, as silly as it sounds, it was really, really good for us. And that actually started in 2005 with us. We ended up going to the Super Bowl that year. And I think what it created is it obviously created a deep breath moment. But it also enabled him to kind of be on the headset and get some other information about what was going on. It helped me. I'm in the game. I'm feisty. It helped me kind of humble myself and understand my role. I'm not the head coach. He's the head coach. Show him respect, whether you agree or disagree with what he's about to say. So when I was coaching my own son, I kind of had a similar thing. I would kind of go and touch the 30, and I would let him be with his teammates and communicate with his teammates. And I saw him develop as a leader that way. He was with his guys. And then I would get to him. And what I found was, instead of me starting the coaching point with what I saw and what I thought he needed to do, I would start the conversation with one question, and I would say, tell me what you saw there. And it was just just a different thing. Tell me what you saw. And I get to hear from him. And a lot of times as a quarterback, you can out yourself as you were looking at the wrong thing. But other times you can say something, and me and as a coach, and I can say, okay, I understand that. Let me tell you why I think you shouldn't have even been looking there, as an example. Why I think hey, this might have been a little bit better. And it helps you as a coach know where you need to spend some time. Now, as a dad, I think my girls played lacrosse in college, and one's still playing in college, and I didn't know anything about lacrosse. So mostly what do I do in that situation? I just become the best cheerleader. I clap, I cheer, I hydrate them, I feed them. And when it comes to strategy or complaining about referees, I don't do it. I just completely stay out of it. I stay out of X's and O's. I stay out of referee talk. And I just say, great hustle. That was exciting. Loved your effort, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it's so hard not to be the guy over there coaching, because we feel like that's our job as dads, and we want to share information with them. And whether it's about on the field of play or about the game of life, it's always, I find myself just pausing sometimes and saying, maybe I should just ask a question right here, instead of trying to disseminate information to them, and just get to know where their heart's at right now.
Yeah. Well, I had one child that she's a great athlete, but I don't want to say she wasn't always super, super, super coachable, but I was really bothered by her lack of hustle at one point. And she was way younger. But what I did was I just filmed her and just basically walking, on the field. And I just would share it to her. No comment. It wasn't trying to do anything, but in a way I was, but I didn't say anything. I'm like, oh, here's some film. And I think she just saw herself walking enough. And I think she got it. Like she figured it out. And she didn't mean to like ride it or whatever, but instead of like zooming out, I just zoomed in and it just like, well, what are you doing? Like she saw I think she saw what I saw, but I didn't have to like sort of be that person.
Yeah, that's good. All right, Matt, really thank you for the time. Thank you for the pearls of wisdom you shared here and the stories. Before you go, though, since we're right in the thick of football playoffs, I got to get your take. Who are you excited about this year? Who's going to win it all?
Well, I'm really excited about my former team, the Seattle Seahawks, and I'm really excited about my dad's former team, the New England Patriots. I feel terrible for the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix, I think, is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the game. And I think Jared Stidham's in a really tough spot coming in, hasn't thrown a pass in like 2 years. And now he's going to start the AFC Championship game against Mike Vrabel's defense. The Patriots, they're really good. But I think the two best teams in the NFL this year just happened to both be in the NFC, the LA Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. They played each other twice this year. The Rams beat up on the Seahawks in the first one, and then the Seahawks beat them in the second one. And so here we are, a third matchup, which is not very common, but it's for the NFC Championship game, and it's a chance to go to the Super Bowl. So to me, I think that Sean McVay is one of the best offensive coaches in the game. Mike McDonald of the Seahawks is one of the best defensive coaches in the game. And so, like, for that reason, I think this is like the matchup to watch. Like, this to me is the Super Bowl in a way. No disrespect to the AFC, but these are the two best teams. And I think the X factor, because everything's so even, is the kick return, punt return game of the Seahawks. It's a weakness of the Rams. They've already fired their special teams coach mid-season, and it's a strength of the Seahawks. They opened the game against the Niners last week with an opening kickoff to the house with Rashid Shaheed, who they traded for mid-season from the New Orleans Saints. So I think if you're looking for an X factor, it's got to be the return game. It's got to be special teams. And, when I was playing, the playoffs, one of our nemesis teams was the Chicago Bears. And part of the reason was they had this great return guy in Devin Hester. And even the year that we went to the Super Bowl, Peter Warwick from Florida State, he was our return guy. So like a great return guy is important. People think about the great quarterback that Brett Favre was for the Green Bay Packers. Well, the MVP of that Super Bowl was Desmond Howard, and so like, I just think it's an overlooked part of the game, special teams, kicking game, but it's real. And if you've watched Seahawks football this year, which I've watched every game, I just think like they're next level when it comes to that. Jay Harbaugh, the special teams coach, has done a great job. So that's what I think is going to be an X factor in the game. But I'm fully hoping that it's my team against my dad's old team in the Super Bowl in Santa Clara.
Yeah, well, it'll be a fun one to watch for sure. I really appreciate your insights there. And thanks again for coming on. Thanks for getting in the game.
Thank you, Scott.